This morning, ABC News obtaining newly released body camera video from the King Road home in Moscow, Idaho, where 4 University of Idaho students were murdered in November 2022.
Where's she at? Yep, where's she at?
Video shows Moscow police going room to room, first finding Xana Kernodle and Ethan Chapin.
Slow down. Just come here. There's 2.
Guns drawn, searching the 3rd floor, discovering Madison Mogan and Kaylee Gonzalez.
And your room is this one right here.
Outside the home, one of 2 surviving roommates, Dylan Mortensen, recounting the moments she heard one of her roommates scream.
I heard her scream, and she ran upstairs because she saw someone. And then I heard someone in the bathroom, and I heard her crying, and I heard some guy say that you're going to be okay, I'm going to help you. And I kept calling her name, but she wasn't answering. And then I opened the door for a second, and I saw this guy.
Coming face to face with the masked intruder.
I'm almost positive he was wearing a full black outfit, and he had this mask that was just over his forehead and over his...
Before the case file, before the affidavit, before the courtroom, there were 4 separate lives moving forward at full speed. Kaylee Gonzalez was 21 years old. She grew up in Rathdrum, Idaho, in a tight-knit family that stayed closely involved in her life. She was studying general studies at the University of Idaho and was preparing to graduate in December 2022. Friends described her as energetic, direct, and deeply loyal. In the weeks before November 12th, she had secured a job offer with a technology company in Texas. She had recently purchased a Range Rover, a milestone she proudly shared with family and friends. That weekend, she returned to Moscow primarily to show Maddie the vehicle and spend time with her closest circle before moving away. It was meant to be temporary, a short visit, a celebration of what was next. Madison Mogan, also 21 years old, was from Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. She majored in marketing and was a member of the Pi Beta Phi sorority. Maddie worked at the Mad Greek restaurant in Moscow and was known among coworkers for her consistency and calm presence. While Kaylee often filled a room with energy, Maddie grounded it. They had been friends from childhood. Their bond was not casual, it was formative. They chose to attend the same university. They shared a home. Their families knew each other well. That closeness shaped the rhythm of the house on King Road. Xana Kernodle was 20 years old, studying marketing as well. She had transferred to the University of Idaho after beginning her college experience elsewhere. Those who knew her described someone independent and determined. She worked at the Mad Greek alongside Maddie. She maintained her own routines and friendships, but blended easily into the social structure of the home. Xana balanced school, work, and an active social life without losing focus on long-term plans. Her mother would later speak about her strength and resilience. To friends, she was steady and self-assured. Ethan Chapin was also 20 years old. He grew up in Conway, Washington, and attended the University of Idaho with his triplet siblings, Hunter and Maisie. Ethan was a recreation, sport, and tourism management major and a member of Sigma Chi fraternity. Teammates and classmates consistently described him as kind, patient, and approachable. He had a reputation for making others feel included. On campus, he was not controversial. He was familiar, trusted, the type of student professors remembered for his attitude rather than his volume. The house at 1122 King Road was a typical off-campus rental, 3 levels, multiple bedrooms, a rotating flow of friends and classmates. It was not unusual for people to stop by. It was not isolated. It sat in a residential area near other student housing, close enough to campus to walk. Inside that home, there was structure. Kaylee and Maddie had rooms on the 3rd floor. Xana had a room on the 2nd floor. 2 additional roommates lived on the 1st level. The arrangement allowed for privacy while still maintaining shared spaces, kitchen, living room, common areas where daily life unfolded in small, unremarkable ways. On social media, their lives appeared typical for college students in a small university town. Group photos, football weekends, smiles framed by string lights. The final Instagram post shared by Kaylee and Maddie showed them standing with Ethan and Xana on a porch. The caption read, one lucky girl to be surrounded by these people every day. It was posted just hours before November 13th began. There were no public warnings, no known threats, no reported stalking complaints filed with campus authorities, no documented altercations that suggested escalation. They were students balancing exams, friendships, jobs, and future plans. Kaylee preparing to leave Idaho for a new career, Maddie building experience in marketing and hospitality, Xana establishing independence and direction, Ethan navigating college alongside his siblings, each of them moving towards something. In documentaries like this, it is easy for names to become evidence markers, locations on a timeline. But before investigators reconstructed movements and phone data, these four were defined by ordinary decisions: what to study, where to live, who to spend time with, what came after graduation. Their final weekend was not structured around fear, it was structured around routine. A home football game, social gatherings, late-night food, conversations that felt like dozens before them. Nothing about November 12th suggested permanence. And that is why this chapter is necessary, because to understand the weight of what followed, the audience must first understand who was lost, not in fragments, not as symbols, but as people whose futures were active, developing, and unfinished. They were not headlines yet. They were students in a small Idaho town, living inside a house filled with noise, movement, and expectation. That normalcy would later be examined under a microscope. But in this moment, in this chapter, they were simply four young adults standing at the edge of adulthood, unaware that the next sunrise would change everything connected to their names.
When investigators reconstructed the timeline, they began with data. Cell phone records obtained through a warrant showed that a device linked to Bryan Kohberger connected to towers covering the King Road neighborhood at least 12 times between late August and early November 2022. Most of those connections occurred late at night or in the early morning hours. The trips followed a pattern: travel from Pullman, Washington into Moscow, Idaho, brief presence near the residence, then a return to Pullman. The distance between the two towns is roughly 10 miles. Surveillance footage gathered from businesses and residential cameras showed a white 2015 Hyundai Elantra circulating near the King Road home during those same months. That vehicle matched the make and model registered to Kohberger. Investigators compared footage, vehicle registration records, and university parking data. The alignment was consistent. Bryan Kohberger was 28 years old, a PhD student in criminology at Washington State University. He had previously earned a master's degree in criminal justice and had studied criminal behavior and investigative methods. Months earlier, he had posted an online academic survey asking individuals about their experiences committing crimes and how they selected targets. After his name became public, that survey drew attention. Authorities did not allege a confirmed personal connection between Kohberger and the four University of Idaho students. No verified communication was publicly identified in court documents at that stage. What stood out instead was repetition, repeated late-night proximity, repeated returns to the same neighborhood. Then came November 12, 2022. The University of Idaho hosted a home football game that day. By evening, students moved between gatherings, restaurants, and fraternity houses. Kaylee Goncalves and Madison Mogan spent part of the night at the Corner Club in downtown Moscow. Shortly before 2 a.m., they were seen at the Grub Truck food vendor before returning home around 1:59 a.m., according to police. Xana Kernodle and Ethan Chapin had been at the Sigma Chi fraternity house. Investigators confirmed they arrived back at the King Road residence around 1:45 a.m. By 2 a.m., all four were inside. Surveillance cameras later captured a white sedan consistent with a Hyundai Elantra entering and exiting the King Road area multiple times, beginning around 3:29 a.m., according to the probable cause affidavit.
During that same window, the phone associated with Kohberger's stopped reporting to the cellular network. Investigators stated the device either lost signal or was intentionally turned off. It reconnected south of Moscow at approximately 4:48 a.m., consistent with a vehicle traveling back toward Pullman. Digital silence, then movement. Investigators also noted that the device returned to the King Road area later that morning, around 9:12 a.m., remaining briefly before departing. After November 13th, according to the affidavit, the phone was no longer recorded near the victim's residence. The prior pattern stopped. In this chapter of the timeline, the focus is not on what happened inside the house, it is on what happened outside it. Multiple late-night visits in the months before. A white sedan circling in the early morning hours. A phone going dark during a critical window, then coming back online as the vehicle left the area. When detectives laid out those movements in sequence, they saw more than coincidence. They saw repetition. And repetition in criminal investigation suggests intent. In the early hours of November 13, 2022, the timeline narrows to minutes. At approximately 4 a.m., surveillance cameras in the King Road neighborhood captured a white sedan moving slowly through the area. The vehicle passed the residence, continued down the street, then turned and returned. Video later reviewed by investigators showed it making multiple passes before appearing to approach the house again at approximately 4:04 a.m.
According to the probable cause affidavit, the vehicle then appeared to park or stop near the residence. Inside the home, most occupants were in their rooms. Court documents state that entry was believed to have occurred through the sliding glass door on the second level. There was no indication of forced entry noted in early filings. Kaylee Goncalves and Madison Mogan were together in a third-floor bedroom. On the second floor, Xana Kernodle was awake. Records show she had received a DoorDash food delivery at approximately 4 a.m. Ethan Chapin was also in the residence. One surviving roommate later told investigators she heard noises she initially interpreted as routine movement in the house. She reported hearing what sounded like someone saying, "There's someone here." At another point, she heard crying coming from one of the rooms, followed by a male voice saying something to the effect of, "It's okay, I'm going to help you," according to court documents. At approximately 4:17 a.m., a security camera located less than 50 feet from the residence captured audio later described by investigators as distorted sounds consistent with a disturbance, followed by a dog barking. Shortly after 4:20 a.m., surveillance footage showed the white Hyundai Elantra departing the area at a high speed of raid. When law enforcement processed the scene hours later, they recovered a knife sheath left behind on a bed. Subsequent forensic analysis identified a single source of male DNA on the sheath's button snap. By 4:25 a.m., the neighborhood was quiet again. The sequence was over, but the evidence remained. Morning arrived without urgency. Inside the King Road residence, 2 surviving roommates remained in their rooms for hours. Calls and messages to the others were unanswered. What began as confusion slowly turned to alarm. By late morning, friends were contacted to come to the house. At 11:58 a.m., a call was placed to 911 requesting assistance for an unconscious person. Dispatch records confirm the call originated from inside the residence. Multiple individuals were present when officers arrived. Moscow police responded expecting a medical emergency. They encountered something far more serious. Officers secured the home. Additional law enforcement and emergency personnel were called in. The scene quickly expanded beyond a single room. 4 victims were located inside the residence. The scope was immediate and overwhelming. Investigators began isolating the property. Yellow tape sealed off King Road. Detectives entered and exited quietly. Forensic teams documented, photographed, collected. Outside, word spread fast.
The University of Idaho canceled classes for the following day. Students packed bags. Parents drove through the night to retrieve their children. A campus once defined by routine shifted into uncertainty. Questions dominated the first hours. How could this happen in a shared home? Why had no immediate alarm been raised? Why were two roommates physically unharmed? Authorities urged patience. Behind the scenes, evidence was already being processed. The case had begun. Inside the lab, attention centered on a single item recovered from the residence, a knife sheath. On its button snap, analysts identified touch DNA. The profile was entered into CODIS. No direct match appeared. Investigators shifted strategy. Using forensic genealogical genetics, they developed an SNP profile from the unknown DNA and uploaded it to publicly accessible genealogy databases that allow law enforcement use. A partial familial connection emerged. The family line led to Pennsylvania. Detectives began building a family tree. Names narrowed. One stood out: Bryan Kohberger. At the same time, Moscow police publicly requested information about a white 2011 to 2016 Hyundai Elantra seen near the residence during the early morning hours of November 13th. Tips surged in. Among them was information from Washington State University police, noting that a graduate student owned a white Elantra matching that description. Superior phone records placed Kohberger's device traveling from Pullman toward Moscow during the relevant window. Data showed the phone ceased reporting to the network and later reconnected south of the city.
Surveillance began in Pennsylvania, where Kohberger had traveled home for the holidays. Agents conducted discreet trash pulls outside the family residence. DNA recovered from discarded material was tested. The results indicated a statistical match consistent with the biological father of the male DNA found on the sheath. Probable cause strengthened. The focus tightened, and the case moved toward action. December 30th, 2022, just after 4 a.m., in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania, law enforcement moved in. FBI agents, Pennsylvania State Police, and local officers executed a no-knock arrest warrant at the Kohberger family home. Bryan Kohberger was taken into custody without reported injury. He was 28 years old. According to later reporting, he asked officers if anyone else had been arrested. Authorities did not publicly elaborate on the context of that question. He was charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of burglary. In the days that followed, he appeared in a Pennsylvania courtroom for an extradition hearing. He waived extradition and was transported to Idaho. Back in Moscow, he made his first court appearance. He sat quietly as the charges were read. When the probable cause affidavit was unsealed, the public saw the framework of the case laid out in detail. DNA evidence, digital records, vehicle surveillance, eyewitness description. Individually, each element told part of the story. Together, prosecutors argued, they formed a clear line. As the case moved deeper into the court system, the focus shifted from arrest to argument. Defense attorneys challenged the foundation of the prosecution's case. They scrutinized how genetic genealogy had been used to narrow the suspect pool. They questioned the handling and interpretation of the DNA recovered from the sheath. They examined whether the sample was sufficient, whether transfer was possible, whether conclusions were overstated. They also targeted the phone data. Cell tower records, they argued, do not provide pinpoint GPS accuracy. Coverage areas overlap. Connections can be misread. The defense emphasized that no confirmed digital communication had been presented linking Kohberger directly to the victims. No established relationship. No identified motive. Pre-trial hearings stretched across months. A gag order limited public statements from attorneys and investigators, tightening the flow of information. Motions were filed seeking a change of venue, citing extensive media coverage. The death penalty remained on the table,
intensifying the stakes. The filings grew thicker, the silence in the courtroom grew heavier, and 4 families continued to wait. The families became central voices in the aftermath, shaping public understanding. The Gonçalves family spoke repeatedly, emphasizing the need for clarity and accountability in the investigation. They urged the community to remain vigilant and compassionate while demanding answers. Zana Kernodle's mother described a mixture of grief and determination, advocating for safety measures and supporting local students. Ethan Chapin's siblings highlighted his kindness in interviews, participating in memorials that celebrated his life rather than the tragedy. Maddie Mogan's family established scholarships in her honor, ensuring her legacy would support others pursuing education and community service. The house on King Road, once a site of normalcy and life, was eventually demolished, leaving a blank space in the neighborhood. Physical reminders were removed, but the emotional imprint endured. Across university campuses, safety protocols were reassessed. Students became more cautious, parents heightened communication. The impact extended far beyond Moscow, Idaho, touching communities nationwide. The investigation continues to evolve, anchored by key pieces of evidence: DNA recovered from the knife sheath, phone records tracing movement, and vehicle surveillance placing a suspect near the scene. Eyewitness accounts add context, describing unusual activity in the early hours. Prosecutors aim to secure a conviction that reflects the severity of the crime, pursuing life imprisonment or the possibility of capital sentencing. The defense maintains that no single element definitively links the accused to the act, emphasizing the principle of presumed innocence. Pre-trial motions, evidentiary challenges, and legal arguments continue to shape the trajectory of the case. Beyond the courtroom, the impact is already measurable. Discussions about campus safety, student routines, and the use of forensic genealogy have intensified. The case has become a reference point for how technology intersects with criminal investigations and the digital traces left by everyday life. Before dawn, a quiet neighborhood was forever altered. 4 students' futures were cut short. A criminology student now faces scrutiny for actions that once existed only in theory. For the families, justice remains a complex, unfolding process. This was not merely a news story. It marked a shift in awareness, legal procedure, and community vigilance. If you value thorough, factual, and respectful coverage of real cases, subscribe now for more true crime documentaries that honor the people behind the headlines. Because behind every investigation, there is a story that deserves careful attention.